We are even closer to the April 13 TTFA elections. Time now for a conversation with presidential candidate Kieron Edwards. And of his slate, we also have Jameson Rigues. I'll start with you, please, Mr. Edwards.
I would have started in football. And before I start, good day to your viewers. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to have Team Progressive on your platform to share our views and our ideas in terms of taking Trinidad and Tobago football forward. Me and a bit of my background, I would have been a former national youth player, former club player, played with W Connection in the Youth Pro League, would have represented Northeast Stars for a little bit as well. Would have been heavy in my community in terms of football with Malabar FC, taking them to the Super League, where we played for a bit, but we are now back in the zonal level. I would have been instrumental in terms of the administration as well as the playing with Malabar FC. So that's a bit of my background when it comes to football. I'm an administrator. I was the former alderman in the Arima Borough Corporation. I have my own business. I have a couple of businesses. My background is really into recycling. I would have been responsible for the recycling of paper for Trinidad and Tobago for some years under Swim Call, with my company managing and sorting and running the management of paper recycling in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's a bit of my administrative side of things.
All right, and we get down a little further into just now, but Mr. Rigues, please and thanks a little about yourself.
Dike, again, thank you for having us today. I would have come on the scene at a very young age with Guaya United Football Club. We would have been a community minor league team per se, and we made the decision to enter into the Eastern Counties Football Union League. We won that, and our aspiration was not to go back and play in the same league, to win the same league again. So we made a decision to see what is out there for us. At the time, there was the Champion of Champion football tournament that we, based on us winning the ECFU, that would have qualified us for the COC, the Champion of Champion. And then we went into that, we won that, and we were propelled to the Trinidad and Tobago Super League. And we won that also in the first year. All that time I had been the manager, from playing on the field to becoming the manager of the Guaya United Football Club. And that is where I would have gained the nucleus of my experience in football administration, because it taught me a lot of things. I would have experimented in football at the time, especially with the crowd support and so on. And Guaya United could boast as being one of the clubs in the country with the most amount of crowd support to date. So, and to do that, there are many different facets in order to achieve that kind of yeah.
So we'll ask about some of them facets, but what I really want to know now, Mr. Rigues, is why you decided to say, all right, I'm going to throw my lot in with you, Mr. Edwards. What is it about Team Progressive? What is it about the presidential candidate that made you say, yeah, I think this is where I'm supposed to be to help take football forward in Trinidad and Tobago?
So, and I love this question because Mr. Edwards and I would have fought against each other in a Super League election, right? However, that time has passed, and I view Mr. Edwards' campaign as one for the grassroots folks in football, one for the membership, the people on the ground, in terms of the members have been fighting basically against the TTFA with not proper representation in terms of those folks who would have sat at the head table, and you have people like Mr. Downer and so on coming to bring representation in terms of what is supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen and so on. And then you find that you have that top-down approach which is not always really appropriate. So you find that Mr. Edwards, Mr. Kieron Edwards would have come on the scene, and he would have laid out his intention to represent the membership and the wider stakeholders of football in Trinidad and Tobago, and that sold with me. So I bought into that, and I decided that, yes, this is the slate that I would very much appreciate being on in order to look at the long-term prospects of football in Trinidad and Tobago.
And I'm always happy to ask this question to the people that you're moving with, because self-praise is no recommendation. So hearing it from you and hearing it from somebody else could be very different things. But you spoke about Mr. Downer, Mr. Rigues. Mr. Edwards, who are some of the other people, who are the other members of the slate?
So we have, as the first vice president, Mr. Colin Murray, wealth of experience as a senior manager at Carib. I think it was important. His strength in terms of public relations. I think Mr. Rigues would have mentioned that membership-driven, centered approach we want to have. I think for too long the membership has been carrying out about the lack of communication from the executive, and I think having someone like Mr. Colin Murray on our slate would help in terms of that communication. It's important to me. We have Jameson Rigues as a third vice president. We have Mr. Downer as our second vice president. We have ordinary members, Mr. Budu, my ASP within the police service, the chairman of police football. It's important to have him there as well, because we want to take, as we said, grassroots football. We know of the issues in terms of crime and whatnot. So having someone like him involved in the executive and decision making when we're doing programs, sending persons to communities, understanding the challenges that we may face in terms of the borderlines and whatnot. We also have 2 accountants on our slate, knowing that the normalization committee would have been placed on Trinidad and Tobago football based on finance. We have 2 certified accountants on our slate. Mr. Ryan Nunes, the owner of AC Power Spain, the top team currently in the TTT Premier League. And we have Alicia Austin, also a chartered accountant. So we have 2 accountants to help manage that situation. We also have Mr. Shelton Williams from Tobago, someone strong in administration as well. Phoenix, being the vice president of Phoenix Football, the top team in Tobago, a team that has structured from top to bottom, having a masters team, having youth teams, having a women team. So it was important for us to get one of the best persons to represent Tobago, as well as we have Mr. Alan Logan, prison officer, someone understanding the challenges of youth as well, being heavy in the administration in terms of the prison service. It was important that we got a group that really represents the different facets of Trinidad and Tobago football.
The way that you described that spread, Mr. Edwards, and even looking at top to bottom, when you were describing Phoenix and saying, well, they have representation at all levels of the game. What are some of the things that are important to you? Is it a manifesto, a list of things that you want to, that you're saying, okay, well, if elected, these are the things that we're going to get behind? What are some of those points for you?
So we have 2 approaches in terms of our approach to the management of the TTFA. So we have the manifesto, which currently is being circulated to the membership, which we went through with members when we met with them. But then we have a 100-day plan in terms of the stuff that we want to aggressively tackle. So I would speak on some of the things with the 100-day plan. So for example, we want to aggressively tackle in terms of sports science, in terms of setting up a sports science unit. We are already in discussion with some of the leading medical persons in Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to sports medicine, to understand, one, recovery, injury prevention, to understand what do we have to do in terms of when we have games, if we're talking youth development, but we want our kids to excel. Some of the issues would have come out of our last game with the person saying that we want to attack more, just on a football discussion. But the question is the ability of our midfielders to, one, defend in the way that our coach Angasif wants to defend, and then have the ability and the fitness and the wherewithal to then move on the attack within that same system. So it comes down to our development in terms of our mobility, our flexibility, all those factors. But those are things that you need to teach young. So within our sports science unit, all those things would be addressed, and that will lead into now our coach education. So our next major thing is coach education. It's not just about giving a certificate for coaches. So that's one aspect of it. They have to do that to say they're certified. But then we want to have regular meetings and bring persons to now raise capacity. So we will go through, we have a serious issue in terms of Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to goalkeepers. So we need to go through, sit with the keeper, with the coaches and say, all right, where are our deficiencies in terms of coaching? If it's midfielders, if it's strength and conditioning, we bring persons in to assist our coaches at all levels to now understand the weakness in terms of strength and conditioning, in terms of goalkeeper, in terms of maybe we're lacking goals for some bit with Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of how our forward play is and assisting in that, and letting the players understand transition in terms of attack and still having a defensive identity. So things like that in terms of our coaching education, those are very key areas for us within the first 100 days. And we have many more we will share with the membership as well.
All right, and Mr. Rigues, I see you nodding your head. What are some of the things that you're really passionate about? Because you spoke about being on the field, you spoke about helping to drive that fan support. What are some of those things that you really want to say, okay, well, if I'm there as was the third vice president, what are some of the things that I'm really going to be behind?
And you see, in my opening remarks, I would have mentioned where I really came from in the football, which is really the zone, the FA, and so on. And bringing back some life to the zonal football, the FA football, because, that is the foundation of football, and in terms of transitioning into a semi-professional and professional football, we need to harness the potential of the zonal football teams, the teams that are in the FA, because Guaya United would have been a perfect example in terms of that progression. And we need to build a proper structure around the zones, the administration, and how do we, assist them in terms of achieving their goals and keeping them relevant, and also, saying to the public that we need to rally around the community football, the clubs within the communities, and give them that kind of motivation in terms of propelling and moving from being a community team, a team playing in a FA, in a zone, to semi-professional football, professional football, the TTT Premier League and that kind of. We need to show them, help them administratively, to really give them that push. So I am passionate about, working within the communities and really bringing back community football on the landscape into the football ecosystem of Trinidad and Tobago.
Because it's Guaya, you say,
It's Guaya.
South is love, but at the same time, that kind of ties into something that I was hearing from someone else in terms of, it seems as though the areas where you have people playing football on a kind of formalized basis, it feels as though it's shrinking a little bit. So to where it's almost as though you find those things where you find more business.
Right, and very well. And you see the rural communities, they feel disadvantaged in terms of the persons at the center apparently finds it hard to get in touch with those rural communities, those far-end communities. And there are so much talent that comes from those areas, so much footballing talent. But then with the feel of neglect demotivates administrators and players alike. So we need to create a structure around that where we are in touch with those far-end teams, those far-end players, those far-end coaches and administrators and so on. So I have a lot of passion in that area, yeah.
And I'm praying that includes Tobago as well. I remember one time when I was fighting on football, people tell me I should have been a keeper, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, how do you
but we went to Tobago and ran against a team coached by Bertie St. Clair of blessed mention. If my tongue dropped any lower, I would have been running on it because the difference in my conditioning as opposed to them. But I think you said between you there are about 200 years worth of experience. Yeah. But at the same time, there's another slate running. What makes Team Progressive this slate to say, okay, well, we're going to carry that mantle forward. We're going to do right by TTFA, and we should emerge victorious on the 13th, Mr. Edwards?
Before getting to that, I want to just make a plug with the Tobago. You would have mentioned Tobago. And within that first 100 days, we have already engaged persons in Tobago to set up a satellite office. So it's important for us to, the same issues that we face in terms of coach education, in terms of the management and the administration of the game, Tobago face those issues. And we would want to work with the TFA in terms of setting up a satellite office, we would have been in discussions. We would have had discussions with the clubs in Tobago, and they want to have a similar setup like the home of football in Tobago, where we can have courses done, we can have training done, teams can come from abroad and take part in their summer training, pre-season training. So we have, within the first 100 days, a plan in terms of engaging Tobago and bringing back that life to Tobago through the TTFA in football.
And even pulling people in from outside would be a nice thing, because I'm sure people be happy for a little rest and recovery in some of the beautiful waters that we have.
Yeah. Of course.
But your second answer, thank you.
Yes, and when it comes to why choose Team Progressive over, you would have mentioned it with your question in terms of having over 200 years of experience. No other slate, well, there's only one other slate, and they cannot boast of having even close to that level of experience and competency in terms of the sport. As much as we have professionals within our slate, and everyone within our slate serves a different purpose, all of our slate would have been part of football. They understand the football, and it's not just having experience or having a skill. It's being able to translate that experience and those expertise into football. And we have seen over the years persons coming from different walk of life being executives and not being able to lead football. And there's a difference between being a manager in an organization and being a leader. And I think when you look around our slate, you'll see a lot of leaders. Jameson Rigues being the president of the Super League, and that league being one of the best run leagues in the country when they were active before the TTPFL. Myself being the president of Eastern Football Association, Mr. Dongna being the president of Referees Association for so many years, Mr. Colin Murray being the secretary at Queen's Park, one of the most strong institutions when it comes to football in Trinidad and Tobago, and the list goes on. So it's important in terms of bringing your expertise in life and transition it into the sport. And we're seeing other persons doing it and having a challenge doing it. And our slate, I think, is the example of what those experiences and translating it into football means.
I think on that we're going to let it breathe, unless you have a 30 seconds, Mr. Rigues.
Well, I think that, in Trinidad and Tobago, this is a small country, and it shouldn't be difficult for all systems to be able to work together, right? I think we know this Team Progressive slate. We know what is needed, we know what is required, and we have been experiencing the downfall in football. And at the heart of our campaign is to move it from the downfall in terms of an upward trajectory. Yeah?
All right, so we want to thank you very much, gentlemen, Mr. Jameson Rigues, as well as Mr. Kieron Bo Edwards.